Brandon, bananas and pink grapefruit. Brandon followed the sound of Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" through the darkness and found Richard trapped under part of a wall. "Help me get him out of here," Brandon cried. Together, Brandon, Pratik, and Gale were able to lift the layers of drywall high enough for Richard to crawl out. When Richard was free, Brandon dropped to his knees and threw his arms around him. "Brandon!" Richard cried, hugging him back. "I couldn't hear and couldn't see. I thought I'd been blinded and deafened by the blast, so I just started singing. I couldn't even hear myself, but I hoped somebody else would, and you did. You saved my life, kid." "Now we're even," Brandon said. He wasn't sure Richard heard him, but he'd make sure he told him again later. "We need to find one of the exits up onto the street," Pratik told them. Brandon didn't want to move, didn't want to let Richard go. But he knew they had to get out of here, and he kept the others waiting long enough. Richard was wobbly and had to lean on Brandon to stand, but he could make it. "Which way do we go? I still can't see a thing," Gale said. "What if we walk right into a hole in the floor and fall down into a subway tunnel?" Pratik asked. Something crunched in the near distance, like rock shifting, and the ceiling groaned. "I don't think we have a lot of choice," Brandon said. "We have to try," said Gale. She took their hands. "Human chain." Brandon went first. He was closest to the ground and could feel his way as they went. Pratik was the biggest of them, and he took over helping Richard walk. Brandon moved very slowly, pushing his waterlogged sneakers forward an inch, then another inch, then another. The darkness was total and complete. Pratik was right. The blast might have blown holes in the floor. Would he stumble into a hole and fall to his death? Walk straight into a broken window and slice himself into pieces? Brandon had to fight down his panic. The only way out of here was if they all kept their cool. Brandon kicked things as he went. Broken glass, pieces of drywall, wet clothes, soda cups, shoes, boxes with unknown things in them. He called out warnings about obstacles to the others when he could. Without his sight, Brandon focused on his other senses. He reached out with his hands, but also listened for clues in the sound of the water at their feet and the creaking of the building. He used his nose, too. What was that smell? Something made him think of bananas and pink grapefruit, and he frowned. What in the mall would smell like that? He ran through the shop directory in his head. Was there a smoothie place here? No. There was a Ben & Jerry's and a yogurt place, but those were very different smells. Suddenly, he had it, and he stopped. "We're going the wrong way," he told the others. "How do you know?" Pratik asked. "Smell that? Bananas and pink grapefruit? We're near the body shop. That's the smell of hair and hand stuff." "Oh my God, he's right," said Gale. "I can smell the ginger shampoo." Brandon turned the group around, following the map in his head. He moved more confidently now, and in his hurry, he ran right into something shin-high. Gale tried to hang on to him, but the thing was big and hard and hollow, and Brandon fell down, face first on top of it. "Ow!" Brandon cried. His shin screamed in pain, and his right hand where he was cut stung all over again. "Brandon, you okay?" Richard called. "Yes," Brandon grunted. A fuzzy, wet fur ball bumped into his arm in the water, and Brandon jerked back in disgust. "A rat!" New York City was full of rats. There had to be a bunch of them down here right now trying to survive like Brandon and the others. The thought horrified him, and he scrambled to get away. In his panic, his hand brushed another of the fur balls, and he felt its big fingers. Its big fingers. Brandon put his hand back out in the darkness, afraid but curious, and felt for one of the furry things. It had arms and legs, and big cloth eyes and teeth, and a tag sewn into the side. Brandon sagged with relief. He would have laughed if he hadn't been so afraid. He'd been frightened by a harmless stuffed animal. Gale helped him back to his feet, and Brandon ran his hands over the big hollow thing he'd run into. It had all kinds of weird curves and contours and was slick and cool and smooth like fiberglass covered with a varnish. What was Brandon touching? A very recent memory came back to him, and he turned excitedly to the others. "It's the statue of Bugs Bunny," Brandon said. "We're at the Warner Brothers store. We're going in the right direction." They couldn't get past the debris near the sunglass hut, but Brandon knew there was another way around, past the Fila store with its sportswear and sneakers. That would take them right to the exit to Vesey Street next to the Duane Reade. They could get out there. Brandon told the others the plan, and they were off again. Brandon went slowly, achingly slowly, but he wasn't eager to repeat his Bugs Bunny collision with something that could be a lot more dangerous, like the railing to the path escalators. The sound of a cell phone ringing out in the darkness made them all jump, then stop in their tracks. "It's a Nokia," said Pratik. "My wife has one just like it. She's not here, thank God," he added. The phone kept ringing. "What do we do?" Brandon asked. "See if you can get to it," Richard told him. Brandon changed course, veering slightly off to the left. He got closer, closer, and then the ringing stopped. He froze and waited. "Do we?" he started to ask, and then the phone started ringing again. Brandon homed in on it in the darkness, leading the human chain closer and closer, inch by inch, until his foot ran into something big and hard. He put his hands out and felt around, and Gale and the others did the same. The phone was buried under a pile of rubble, along with whoever had been carrying it. "I think I found a part of the ceiling, but I can't lift it," Pratik said, straining. "I can't even see what to lift," said Richard. "We have to leave them for the rescue workers when they get here," Gale said quietly. "If they get here," Brandon added in his head. From the way no one spoke, he wondered if they were all thinking the same thing. They came together again in their human chain, and Brandon led them away while the phone continued to ring behind them. Somebody somewhere outside the towers, desperately dialing a number again and again that would never be answered. A few minutes later, Brandon found the corner of what he guessed was the Fila store. When he made the turn into the next hallway, he saw a small fire in one of the restaurants down the way. It was the Sbarro. Brandon had taken them the right way. "We're almost there," Brandon told his friends. They inched closer. The fire wasn't big, but it was a beacon in the darkness. Probably a grease fire, Brandon thought, like the one he'd seen that morning in Windows on the World. The last time he'd seen his dad. He swallowed the memory. He had to focus on getting out, leading his friends to safety. A pile of debris blocked the exit up to Vesey Street, but there was enough light from the fire in the Sbarro to pick their way up and over the rubble. When they were on the other side, they could see daylight at the top of the escalator. "We made it!" Pratik cried. Brandon wanted to sink to his knees in thanks and exhaustion, but they couldn't stop yet. Not when they were so close. Still holding hands, they hurried up the stairs toward the sunlight at the top. They came out on Vesey Street, right across from the post office, and laughed and cried and hugged each other. They were out. Out of the mall, out of the Twin Towers, out of danger. They had survived. But something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Soon they all began to notice it and stopped celebrating. A thick, heavy smoke cloud hung over lower Manhattan. Outside had looked bright when they were underground, but now that they were up on the street, the sky was so dim it felt like twilight. It looked, too, like somebody had driven a tank through the city. Trash cans and cars were crushed, lampposts were bent, bus stops were broken, and trees were shattered, and everything was covered with a fine, light gray dust. A fire truck and an ambulance parked in the middle of Vesey Street were coated in the same stuff. their red lights still flashing underneath the thin layer of gray. The dust reminded Brandon of snow. Not just the way it blanketed everything, but how it made things quiet, too. Muffled the sounds of the city. Manhattan was never quiet, not even at night. But now, it felt as quiet and still as the underground mall had been after the blast. Something else was wrong, too. Where are all the people? Gail whispered. There were footprints in the dust, but the streets were empty. There were always people in Manhattan, millions of them. Now there were none. Project turned and took a step back. Oh my God, he whispered. Brandon looked up. It took his brain a long moment to process what he was seeing, or what he wasn't seeing. What was supposed to be in the big, empty slice of the Manhattan skyline, but wasn't there anymore. The South Tower of the World Trade Center was gone. The whole 107-floor skyscraper had collapsed.
Rashmina, we're here because we're here. Rashmina wriggled through the hole in the cave wall and fell clumsily to the floor of another room. She paused for a long moment, scared to move. She had no idea what was in this hidden chamber, but she had to see if it led to some way out. Her mother handed the flashlight to her through the hole. Be careful, Mina John. We'll work on widening the entrance from this side just in case, Taz told her, and Rashmina heard him begin to chip away at the rock. Rashmina clicked on the flashlight, and a bright white ghost with soulless eyes stared back at her. Rashmina screamed and dropped the flashlight. Mina John, her mother called. Mina John, are you all right? Rashmina? Taz called. Rashmina grabbed her chest and waited for her heart to stop trying to thump its way out of her. The flashlight was still on, but pointed away from whatever she had seen, and she was afraid to pick it up again. But the thing was still there, right in front of her in the dark. Rashmina? Her mother called again. With shaking hands, Rashmina picked up the flashlight and pointed it up at the ghost. Rashmina exhaled. It wasn't a ghost at all. It was just a statue carved out of white marble with blank, empty eyes. I'm all right, Rashmina told her mother. I just saw something that scared me. I'm all right, she added in English for Taz. The shiny white statue was the top half of a bare-chested man wearing a toga. His face was young, his nose was long and flat, and his stone hair was curly. Rashmina hadn't seen anything like it before. Islamic art almost never included human figures, so this statue must have been very old, from the time when the Greeks had invaded and ruled Afghanistan, perhaps. But that was thousands of years ago. Had this statue really been sitting here, hidden away in this cave all that time? What's in there? Taz asked. An old statue, Rashmina called back to him. And other things, too. Rashmina played the flashlight over the artifacts in the room. Relics of times long past she knew only from her history lessons. There was a round brass shield with a black winged horse painted on it that must have been from ancient Greece. Next to that was a white pith helmet, like the kind British soldiers had worn when they had invaded Afghanistan 200 years ago. Along the far wall were a few old English Enfield rifles, and next to that was a stack of curved bows, like the kind the Mongols had once wielded in their conquest of Afghanistan. There were Soviet weapons here too, rusty old landmines and automatic rifles and belts of bullets. Like the statue, everything was covered by a thin gray dust. Nobody had been in this room in a long, long time. On the other side of the wall, Taz sang softly. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. What is that song? Rashmina asked softly. She didn't know why, but this room made her want to whisper. It's nonsense, really, said Taz. Something I heard my sergeant singing years ago. When I came back from my 3rd tour of duty, it comes from World War I. The soldiers in the trenches sang it while they were waiting to be sent charging straight into the enemy machine guns. The tune is something we sing on New Year's Eve, Old Lang Syne. Do you know it? No, Rashmina said. Taz sang another song. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind, should old acquaintance be forgot and Old Lang Syne. The lyrics didn't make any sense to Rashmina, but she didn't ask. She searched the chamber for a way out while Taz kept talking. The soldiers back in World War I, they changed the words of Old Lang Syne to we're here because we're here because we're here because they didn't know why they were fighting, he said. You asked me why the U.S. is still here. I think we're still in Afghanistan because we got in and we don't know how to get out. If we stay, it's bad, and if we leave, it's bad. There's no right answer. I think it's the same as those boys back in World War I. We're here because we're here, and we don't know how to leave. Taz was quiet for a moment. Rashmina's flashlight moved across old military medals and flags and pendants, little statues of the Buddha, a bust of Lenin, the Russian revolutionary leader, Greek and Persian and English coins, bits of pottery with colorful drawings, and a British pocket watch, and a furry Russian cap with a red star on it. One of the new guys I knew back at Bagram, a rookie soldier named Garcia, Taz said. He was born after we invaded Afghanistan. He stepped on a roadside bomb that hadn't been there the day before, and now he's dead. He died fighting a war that started before he was born. You have to be 18 to join the army. 18! We're still fighting the same war almost 20 years later. And for what? We're never going to change this place. As Taz's words sank in, Rashmina realized what this room was. This wasn't an arsenal, like the cave where she and Passoon had found the Taliban cache. This was a kind of shrine, a memorial to all the armies who had invaded Afghanistan and conquered it, just like Taz and the Americans, only to learn that they could never rule it. Rashmina's flashlight caught some Pashto words painted on the wall, and she took a step back. The paint was very old and the dialect a little strange, but Rashmina could just read the words. It said, "We are content with conflict. We are content with fear. We are content with blood, but we will never be content with a master." "Rashmina, do you see any way out?" her mother called. There was no other entrance to this little room, but there was a little crack in the wall at the back. Rashmina clicked off her flashlight, and yes, she saw a tiny sliver of daylight through the crevice. "This wall," she called. "It leads outside. If we can just break through it." "I'll come through," Taz said. "I can chip away at it, like I did this one." Doom! 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 The cave shook with more blasts from above. Apparently, the fighting wasn't over. Dirt and rock rained down from the ceiling of the cave, right around the little hole to the other room. The statue of the Greek half-man toppled to the ground with a thud, and the shield clattered as it fell. "I don't think we have time for that," Rashmina yelled to Taz. She spied something in the beam of her light, an old Soviet landmine, and it gave her an idea. "Stay there," she told Taz. Rashmina propped the flashlight on the Greek statue's head and carefully gently dragged the landmine over to the crack in the far wall. She wedged the landmine into the crack, then picked up the Greek shield. The leather straps inside had long since dried out and broken, but Rashmina was still able to hold it up by the metal buckles on its back. Boom, boom! More explosions rocked the cave from above. Rashmina, what are you doing? Her mother cried from the other side. The ceiling's falling apart in here. Get as far away from the entrance as you can, Rashmina called back to her mother. I'm going to try to blow a hole in the other wall. You're what? Moore cried. There was a partial wall toward the back of the chamber, and between that and the shield, Rashmina hoped she would be protected enough from the mine. Now she just needed something to activate it. There weren't any big rocks around, but the bust of Lenin would do nicely. Rashmina picked it up and said a silent prayer. Her hand still stung from the gash, but she swallowed the pain, lobbed Lenin's head toward the landmine, and ducked down behind the wall. The shield held tight over her head. Thunk! Lenin missed. Rashmina closed her eyes, her heart thumping in her chest. She'd been ready for an explosion and then nothing. Still holding the shield, she got up to get Lenin and try again. Thoom! 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 Big explosions outside rocked the cave again, and this time a little piece of the ceiling broke off right above the crack in the wall. The rock fell on the landmine, and kaboom! The landmine exploded, and Rashmina went flying.